By the 1970s, the United States was the envy of the world. It was still fighting the Cold War, but it was winning. The Soviet Union was straining to hold its empire together. Countries under its control were restless. Others were actively seeking membership in NATO, not out of fear, but opportunity. American power secured global shipping lanes. Trade flowed. Markets stabilized. Nations rebuilt. The dollar anchored the global economy. American industry, capital, and culture reached every corner of the world. For decades, if a nation wanted prosperity, it aligned with the United States. If people wanted opportunity, they came to America. This was not nostalgia, it was reality. And yet, something changed. Instead of compounding that success, instead of widening opportunity even further, America began to fracture. The question is not whether America once worked. It did. The question is, what happened next? Passports to the past, traveling through history, one country at a time. How America organized the world. By the end of the Second World War, the United States stood in a position no nation in history had ever occupied. Europe was physically devastated. Asia lay in ruins. Empires that had ruled for centuries were collapsing under the weight of war, debt, and exhaustion. America, by contrast, emerged intact. Its cities stood, its factories expanded, its workforce grew, its military spanned the globe. But more importantly, the United States did something no previous superpower had done. It did not simply dominate the post-war world, it organized it. In 1944, as the war was still being fought, representatives from 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The goal was not to win the war, but to prevent the next one. What emerged was a new global economic framework, later known simply as Bretton Woods. At its core was a radical idea. Economic instability created political extremism. If nations could grow, trade, and prosper together, war would become less likely. The United States would anchor this system. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, backed by gold. Exchange rates stabilized. New institutions were created to provide loans, liquidity, and reconstruction capital. But the system went deeper than money. Under the security umbrella of American military power, global trade routes were protected. Shipping lanes remained open. Piracy, blockades, and regional coercion were suppressed. For the first time in history, nations could specialize and scale without fear that their economic growth would be destroyed by invasion or imperial seizure. Germany rebuilt as an industrial powerhouse. Japan transformed into a manufacturing giant. Western Europe stabilized and expanded. Countries no longer had to be self-sufficient in everything. They could focus on what they did best. This was globalization, not as ideology, but as infrastructure, and it worked. When the system turned inward, for decades, this system produced extraordinary results. The world grew richer, extreme poverty declined, trade expanded exponentially, and America benefited enormously. Its corporations sold everywhere. Its currency dominated. Its culture spread. Its influence shaped international norms. The United States did not just win the Cold War militarily, it made itself indispensable economically. This is why, by the 1960s and 1970s, America was the envy of the world. But systems that work globally do not always work evenly at home. As the rest of the world rebuilt and caught up, something subtle but profound began to change inside the United States. The post-war American economy had been built around a single assumption, that industrial growth, strong unions, and rising wages would continue indefinitely. That assumption proved wrong. Corporate influence and elite power began to steadily erode the economic opportunities available to many Americans. Factories that once existed only in America now existed everywhere. Corporations faced a choice. They could continue operating within a system of strong labor protections and rising wages at home, or they could take advantage of the very globalization America had made possible. Many chose the latter. Manufacturing moved, not overnight, but steadily. Production shifted to countries where labor was cheaper, unions were weaker or non-existent, and regulations were lighter. This was not framed as abandonment, it was framed as efficiency. Profit margins increased, shareholders benefited, executives were rewarded. The consequences landed unevenly. communities hollowed out, wages stagnated, job security declined. The American economy did not collapse, but it changed its shape. Two incomes, less security. As manufacturing weakened, a service economy rose in its place. Retail, healthcare, hospitality, finance, information. These jobs kept the economy moving, but paid less, offered fewer benefits, and provided less stability. The social contract shifted. One income was no longer enough. Two incomes became necessary, not optional. Families adapted, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. This transformation was not accompanied by renewed investment at home. Industrial towns were not rebuilt at scale. Union power was not replaced with new protections. The gains of globalization were not evenly redistributed. Policy increasingly favored capital mobility over labor stability. The system optimized, but for returns, not resilience or financial opportunities for all. Status, identity, and anxiety. As this was happening, another dynamic emerged. America's dominant demographic, white Americans, and white men in particular, had long grown up with the expectation that opportunity flowed naturally to them, that they would do better than their father and so on. For generations, that expectation had been reinforced by labor laws, custom, and culture. Now opportunity felt harder to reach. Jobs disappeared, wages flattened, competition intensified. At the same time, legal and social changes expanded access for groups previously excluded. Civil rights advanced. Women entered the workforce in greater numbers. Immigration continued. Policies such as affirmative action were introduced to address the effects of historical discrimination by expanding access to opportunity. From a structural perspective, these changes were necessary and overdue. But psychologically, for those who felt their status slipping, the experience was disorienting. When opportunity shrinks, people do not ask abstract economic questions. They ask personal ones. Why is this happening to me? Who is taking the American dream from me? And when systems fail to provide clear answers, people look for someone to blame. Elites, power, and the widening gap. The elites, those with wealth, mobility, and influence, were largely insulated from these changes. They could move capital. They could move themselves. They could benefit from globalization while avoiding its costs. Government increasingly served their interests. Bailouts protected institutions, not communities. Tax structures favored accumulation. Corporate influence expanded. Two Americas began to emerge. One global, mobile, insulated. One local, rooted, exposed. History shows what happens next. When opportunity narrows and accountability disappears, people become receptive to simple explanations and strong voices. Demagogues do not create dissatisfaction, they exploit it. Identity, politics, and fracture. This is where the story moves beyond economics. Politics, once a mechanism for negotiation, became a contest of identity. Two parties once acted as a brake and an accelerator. Consensus existed because compromise was required. That system depended on one assumption: that political disagreement did not threaten personal identity. As demographics changed, that assumption collapsed. Politics became about who belonged, and identity does not compromise. Media adapted quickly. Conflict attracted attention. Attention generated profit. The system did not malfunction. It optimized. America today, a reflection. The result is a country that remains innovative, wealthy, and influential, but increasingly fragmented. That fragmentation did not happen by accident. It is structural. When divisions harden, power learns to operate within separation. Division itself becomes a tool. And at that stage, the danger is no longer just political or economic. It becomes cultural, moral, foundational. Understanding a country in this condition requires stepping back. America today is difficult to summarize in a single sentence. It carries extraordinary achievement and unresolved failure at the same time. Innovative and divided, welcoming and suspicious, confident and uncertain. America's history includes slavery and freedom, expansion and displacement, idealism and exploitation. None cancel the others out. They coexist. To understand America is not to excuse it, but to see it clearly. For those who travel through the United States, there is another America. Vast deserts, endless mountains, ancient forests, rivers that built cities, small towns and large cities, people building lives quietly. They argue, they disagree, they vote differently, but most are not defined by ideology. They are defined by work, love, responsibility, and hope. America has reinvented itself before, not cleanly, not quickly, but repeatedly. That does not guarantee success or that it won't include violence of some sort, but it makes renewal possible. We are passports to the past, traveling through history, one country at a time.